And we are 54 days away from the most important Senate elections of our life in Georgia. We will have to help Jon Ossoff and Reverend Warnock win that. We are 69 days until Donald Trump is gone. Sadly, though, in our country, we have a COVID explosion going on. Yesterday, over 1,400 of our fellow Americans died. That means today there are over 1,400 American families mourning the loss of a loved one, a mother, a father, a grandparent, an uncle, an aunt, even a child. We have the highest number of hospitalizations we've ever had, ever in this entire thing. We had over 140,000 new COVID cases yesterday, and Trump is doing nothing. If Donald Trump is going to do nothing to deal with this COVID explosion, he should resign today. Get the hell out of our White House. Let Pence, if you want to do it, or both of you resign, let Speaker Pelosi, but at least let Pence lead here, because Trump is doing nothing but sulk and try to steal an election. And that brings me to the big thing that we'll talk about on my show tonight. We talked about it yesterday, and I know I didn't mean to, but I scared people. My goal when I talk about Donald Trump's his end game is not to scare, but to prepare. It's to prepare us for what he's trying to do so we can have a strategy to counter it. Yesterday, I made the point very clearly that Donald Trump's end game with his lawsuits and Republicans supporting him is not to root out fraud. It is literally to overturn the will of the people. It is literally to steal this election. Yesterday, I was highly concerned. Today, I have a little less concerns because certain things have happened that are very helpful to us. I'll go through it in much more detail on my show, but a couple of things that make me feel vastly different and vastly better than I did yesterday. One is there was a great paper that came out by this bipartisan group of election experts, Democrats and Republicans, and remarkable lawyers who laid out what I believe, myself as a lawyer and reading the cases, that would make it almost impossible for Trump to overturn the popular vote. Now, let's be clear. There was a great article in the Washington Post today. The Republican Party has backslid on democracy. This is objectively by experts from outside of America looking at it. They have little by little creeped away from democracy to embrace authoritarianism and fascism. To remind you, fascism is not an ideology like socialism. Fascism is simply a way to stay in power that is rejecting democracy. That's what they're doing. Fascism is simply a way to gather and hold power. And it's inconsistent with a democracy. And that's what Trump is doing. Well, the scary thing is, there was a big article in the Atlantic a little over a month ago before the election. And in that, it talked about they'd spoken to Republican Party officials who said point blank that they had spoken to the Trump campaign, and Trump's goal after November 3rd was to claim widespread fraud, giving state legislatures where Republicans control it the chance to overturn the election results by picking electors to the Electoral College who would not support Joe Biden even though he won the state. It is scary because this article got a lot of press from the Atlantic, predated the election. This is not new. This is over a month ago. And we are seeing Trump do that now. And the fact that we don't have a Supreme Court decision saying this can't be done is what's alarming. That's a teeny glimmer of hope for the Trump team. You've also had Republican members of state legislature, like in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, openly talk about, and Ron DeSantis in Florida, the governor, and Lindsey Graham openly talk about throwing away the will of the people because they are fascists. They want to bring fascism to this country. You have to understand, they might call Democrats socialists. That's not true, but the GOP is now a parody of fascism if they get away with what their goal is right here, which is overturning the will of the people. Well, this National Task Force on Election Crisis really went through in great detail how this would be almost impossible. And a couple other factors happened since yesterday, which backed this up in the real world. A couple of important dates for the Electoral College. December 14th is the day that the state electors meet to the Electoral College to vote. Between now and then is the scary part. That's why Donald Trump is alleging fraud everywhere, widespread fraud everywhere. All he's doing, even though it's not true, is to give cover to Republican state legislatures who are fascists, who don't believe in democracy, to give them cover to overturn the election. And sadly enough, many in the GOP base are on board with this. They too don't believe in democracy. Some do, some don't. The question is how many. Now, as this paper really went through in great detail, our Electoral College is based on two things, the Constitution and the Electoral Count Act. And that law has a few things that actually protect us here, which is thankful, and the Constitution itself. Not to get too wonky here, I'll go in more detail on my show, but for them to make this argument that there was such widespread fraud and appoint their own electors, which overturn the will of the people, the backstop to that is Congress. And on January 6th, Congress in a joint session meets, and they listen to the votes. They listen to the electoral votes from every state. Now, if they disagree with it, both chambers together have to agree to throw out electoral votes. If they see that the will of the people is clearly for Biden in these states, I have confidence that we can get 2 to 3 Republican senators to come over and go, we're not going to overturn an election in the United States of America. We're not going to let that happen. So, and if we win on January 5th, because to remind you, the Georgia vote is 1 day before this electoral college vote. So if you really want to protect our democracy and make sure Trump is gone, we've got to win the Senate back on January 5th. The bottom line, this paper also points out some great things here. Even not depending on Congress, it would very, very likely be unconstitutional to overturn the will of the people based on just political whim and political power. The only reason we can't say that 100% is the Supreme Court has not considered this very question ever before, because it was never contemplated we would have a fascist in the White House. And that's what we have. This is not hyperbolic. Academically, we have a fascist. That's partly. Secondly, the predicate for the Republicans to overturn this election and have a straight face that there is fraud is becoming harder and harder as court after court are throwing out Donald Trump's cases. And their star witness in Pennsylvania has now officially recanted his story. He recanted it. Washington Post said last night. Then he said, I didn't. Now we have the video of him speaking to federal agents where they ask him, are you saying your story is not true anymore? And he goes, I guess not. And there's more. Guess what? Then he tells us that Project Veritas, yes, those scumbags, actually drafted the affidavit. And Richard Hopkins, the guy who recanted, said, I didn't even read the affidavit. They drafted it for me. So this was Project Veritas committing crimes. And I don't know why they're not prosecuted, and they should be. In any event, that's gone. We have court case after court case saying there is no fraud, no evidence. In Arizona, there's a court argument this very morning where the lawyer for Trump's team actually admitted that their affidavits claiming fraud were based on spam, as they called it, because they got from ridiculous reports of just people on the internet lying, Trump supporters lying, and the judge was stunned by what was going on. So when you lose the cover story that there actually is any semblance of fraud, then it just is an out-and-out theft. And I don't think that the Senate Republicans would allow that. I think they would vote to throw those electoral votes out and just take the electoral votes of the winner who won the popular vote, which is Joe Biden, or ultimately the Supreme Court. And yes, the Supreme Court I know is conservative, but this is pretty clear stuff here. You can't do this. If there is any fraud, you throw out specific ballots. If it's widespread, you order a new vote. What you don't do is have a legislature overturn the will of the people and say, we know better. We're going to say who won the vote in our state. That can't happen. That's not going to happen here. So that's the one. That's why I feel better about it. It is concerning. I get it. Teeny bit of concern. Don't let your guard down. We have to win January 5th, the Georgia vote, so that we can protect our democracy. So we'll discuss that in a lot more detail. My show is 6 to 9 p.m. on SiriusXM channel 127. Hope you'll tune in there. Hope you become part of our family. Join the conversation. Join. The fight is not over. We're going to stay angry. We're going to stay active. Get Trump out and then push for policies that actually help our fellow Americans. Thanks for